Hi guys, I want to talk to you today about the tiers in your classroom in education. When you hear people, your administration talking about MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, that is your tiers, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, right? So what does that mean? Tier 3, I'll start with the bottom. Tier 3 is your lowest of the low, right? These are the kids that are really struggling. No matter that they're in your small group, they're just not getting it, and you need to implement some other program, right? And you will come up with this plan with your admin. They will speak to you about what kinds of programs you can use to start an intervention, right? And they might get a specialist to come in, either hired or maybe the district might send someone, right? Your superintendent's office. But there will be supports and guidance for what to do with your tier 3 as far as programming and the extra support that they will need. Your tier 3 is going to be the lowest percentage of your class, okay? The lowest of the low is going to maybe be like 5 kids. If your whole class is tier 3, you need to look at your teaching seriously. Like really think seriously about what is it that you're doing wrong. Because your entire class should not be tier 3, right? That's your lowest of the low. They're not getting anything that you're teaching. Their scores are terrible, and it's consistently terrible. So you cannot implement a program, like an intervention program, to your entire class, like on a consistent basis, because it's going to take away from the curriculum, and it's going to take away from probably small group time if you're just trying to like get your kids who are at level 0 or 1, right, to at least get to a 2, right? So your tier 3 is your lowest of the low, the smallest percentage of your kids that just don't get it. They're just not getting it no matter what you're doing, right? That means another specialist or some other program needs to be implemented for those kids, right? Okay, so moving up, tier 2. Tier 2, these are your small group kids. You take small group kids all the time. Sorry about my dog. You take tier 2 kids all the time, right? So your tier 2, you're going to have your small group of maybe 5 kids in a rotation, right? Those might not be your only small group, but these are the kids who are, maybe they're on the cusp. Maybe they're kind of between a 2 and a 3, okay? These are your kids that you can move up a level, right? You want to really leverage those kids, because these are the kids that you can make the most impact on because you're taking them in these small groups, right? They kind of get it. They're not quite there yet, but they're not completely bombing everything, right? This is your tier 2. So I honestly suggest that everybody gets into a small group rotation so that you're not just taking your kind of mid-level kids, your average kids. Look at the data. This is where you're going to get the most information for your tiers, right? Your data is going to tell you who's on the cusp, who's your lowest of the low, and who can remain in your tier 1, right? And I'm going to get to that in a second. So what are you looking at for data? You might be looking at, if you're in lower grades, you're looking at foundations, right? You're looking at your Acadians probably. If you're in upper grades, maybe like elementary upper grades, you might be looking at iReady, something like that. Right? All the tests from your units that you've been teaching, right? That's going to tell you how kids are doing, right? All of the assessments, the end of unit assessments, right? The summative stuff. And then you can also be looking at, this one is kind of difficult because state exams is what I'm talking about, because those are not going to come out till the following year. So the teacher in the next, higher grade that is going to receive those kids that may have passed or failed those state exams, they can analyze those and see who's where. But really, when you're talking about in the moment tiers, you really want to be looking at like your assessments in the moment, your unit assessments. Maybe you're giving quizzes on your own, right? To just kind of boost, the learning there. You're looking at iReady, you're looking at Acadians, you're looking at whatever other program you take, that your kids take or use, that you can glean some information from as far as data, right? Everything is going to be laid out for you. It's usually pretty simple to log into your kids, into your program from your teacher end and see who's on green, who's on red, who's on yellow, right? Those are your tiers right there. Green is your tier 1, yellow is your tier 2, red is your tier 3. Done and done, right? That's how you can figure it out. It's very easy. These systems now are made to be so easy to read, right? They're color coded. It wasn't like that, when I was teaching. So I'm moving on to tier 1 now. Tier 1, that's your whole class. Your entire class is getting the same stuff that you are teaching. And what I mean by that is that you're teaching your lesson, you're giving your differentiated materials for your, your tier 2s and tier 3s, but everyone, this is a universal thing. Everyone is getting the same work, right? You might want to decide who's going to get scaffolding, who's going to get differentiation. Those are two different things. I'm not sure if I've done a video on that, but I'll do a video on scaffolding versus differentiation another time. Your whole class is tier 1. When you hear tier 1, that's everybody. So when they ask you, what are you doing for tier 1? That means that's your entire class. You're not going to start talking about all of the interventions you're doing for Johnny, Mary, and Sue in your tier 3 that don't, that are struggling and, don't get the work. You're not going to talk about them. You're going to talk about what you're doing for every single student in your tier 1 whole class, right? I know it's just a fancy way of saying whole class, right? But it does mean the whole class, tier 1. Tier 2, again, small group. These are the kids who are in the yellow area of your data, right? If that's what your data looks like. These are the kids who can maybe get they're probably at the high end of a 1 or at the low end of a 2, okay? And you can, move them. They're going to be the easiest to move. And then you have your tier 3. Like I said, this is your lowest of the low. Nobody has a whole class of tier 3, all right? If you have a whole class of tier 3, start looking at another career, okay? Because something is wrong with your teaching. You have to look inwardly, do whatever you have to do. Look at the data and see what are the standards that are really, really low, that are consistently low, that the kids are not getting, because some of these standards anchor the other standards, right? So, if you're looking at like multiplication, let's say, I'm just, thinking out loud now. If you're looking at multiplication being as a consistent failure, let me backtrack. If you're looking at fractions, let's say, if you're looking at fractions as being a consistently failed standard in your classroom, what's the crux of it? What's the standards that come before that? The standards that come before that is they have to know multiplication, right? They have to know whole versus part, right? They have to know all those things before it that build up to that standard that they keep failing, right? So think about that, right? So once you look at the data and you're like, all right, these kids are red and these kids are yellow, now what? Okay, well, now what is look at what's needed before that to anchor those and boost those. And that's going to be your small group work, right? That's going to be your tier 3 interventions that you're going to talk with your administration about, right? Because they are going to let you know how to approach it. Like I said, tier 3, it's another level. So they might get somebody from the outside, because pretty sure you're not the only one with that issue, right? If everyone's been teaching the same curriculum and similarly, because they get the same PDs or whatever the case is, you are 100% not going to be the only one with that problem that you have, right? So this tier 3 is going to be something that you're going to speak with your admin about, because they're going to have some, MTSS supports for you, right? That they either have to bring in, or they might give PD for just a certain amount of, groups of classes, groups of grade teams, right? Your tier 2, easiest to move. Look at the data. What do they need right before that to get to that place where they understand the work? Get all your small group materials and start hitting those standards until they get to the level that they need to be at, right? And then your tier 1, everybody gets that, right? And really, everybody should be getting everything anyway for tier 1. So the only thing you want to be doing with tier 1, when you're giving your lessons and your assessments and things like that, You just want to be either differentiating or scaffolding for everybody, like on a universal, way, in a universal way. But you're not dumbing down the work, and you're not making it, making it too difficult or making it too easy. It's going to be, everybody gets the same thing. That's equity, that's equality, right? That's where all of that stuff comes in, right? A fifth grade student gets fifth grade work no matter what, right? Now, yes, maybe they might be on third grade level as far as reading or mathematically, right? They don't have number sense, but you can scaffold or differentiate that work, right? So they have to be getting the same work at their level because that is their right, right? You can't give them third grade work because it's almost like discrimination, right? It's dumbing it down, and it's not fair to the kid, right? So you're giving them their level work, right? Tier 1, everybody's in fifth grade, great. Everybody gets fifth grade work. Then you can spot check, right? You can either scaffold, right? For scaffolding, you're going to be looking at the materials you need for that. And for differentiating, you're going to be looking at the materials for that. I'm going to get into another video where I explain more of that to make it easier. But basically, that's it. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, MTSS. That's what it is. MTSS is the title. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 3 is your lowest of the low. Tier 2 is your middle. Tier 1, that's everybody, right? Your whole class, okay? Multi-tiered systems of support. You're going to hear that a lot probably in your class, especially if your class has, or if your school has maybe low scores in testing, state exams, in the modules. Maybe you have a new curriculum and everybody's bombing everything, right? So that's where your data is going to come in really handy, right? And you're going to have to look at multiple data sets. I mean, I wouldn't say look at, 5 different data sets. You don't really need that. I think if you have 2, 3 data sets, that's enough for you to get a sense of who's who, right? Because when you're only looking at one data set, the problem with that is that you may know a kid is good at something and it's not reflecting in that one data set, right? So maybe the kid is not a good test taker, right? I don't know. Right? You know the kid that knows something and where it's not reflected in the test, right? So that's why you want to have like a secondary screener or things like that, right? And maybe a third thing. So maybe, for example, you might be looking at iReady, Acadians, and module assessments, right? You want to see what kind of test takers the kids are, right? Did they do it on a laptop? Did they do it on paper? Which one do they seem to do better with, right? I would advise also to really get your kids used to doing that laptop, computer work assessment, because this is now the way, right? All of the exams, most schools are doing everything digitally. And so you want to get them used to being able to type, right? Talk to your, whatever the teacher is that teaches typing or media or tech skills, right? Because you don't have time for that. They have to know how to type and answer and not be like this, especially when you're in fifth grade and you have like paragraphs to write, right? So find out what is the issue with the kids, right? You want to be walking around when they're taking their tests and their assessments. Under no circumstances should you be at your desk. Not at all, right? Now, should you be walking around the whole time, No. But you need to be walking around and watching and seeing who's who. Who's okay on the laptop and the iPad, right? Who's okay writing, right? Who's the kid that can't even spell, right? And that's why they're failing, right? They know the work, but they can't spell, right? Who's the kid that knows the work but can't read, but they can verbally answer, but now you're giving them a written test? Because that's not going to work, right? So you really want to be walking around when kids are testing and just jotting down some things on who needs what, because that's going to be the small group work that you're going to support those kids with when you are in the regular classroom, like day to day, okay? All right, this video is long enough. I just wanted to talk about the tiers. I haven't been on in a while. I'm sorry. Lots of things going on. I'll try to be better about posting, and see you soon. Happy New Year. Bye.